StanceSwitch, the podcast. My name is Brandon. This is the UFC 310 preview. I'm going to be going over the UFC Reddit page, talking about some of the current topics. Obviously, UFC 310. Outside right now, I have a bonfire going. If the smoke gets in the camera, that's part of my idea. We'll see how much I like it or not. I just needed to get StanceSwitch back up and going. So this is the reboot of StanceSwitch, the podcast. Again, my name is Brandon. Thank you for tuning in. I'm not gonna take too much time. Let's get into it. UFC 310 is on this upcoming Saturday, December 7th. It's headlined by Pantoja versus Asakura. I'm gonna be honest. I've seen Pantoja fight. Obviously, I've probably seen Asakura fight, but I'm not super familiar with his style. I'm somewhat familiar with Pantoja, but I don't have a call for the fight. I don't have a pick. I'm gonna be going through the Reddit page. I'm anticipating some stuff about the fight, but honestly, that is not the most exciting fight on the card. The most exciting fight on the card for me is probably the most exciting fight on the card for most people. It's Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Ian Machado Gary. I've been watching all of their past fights. This is my read on it. And there's a pretty firm conclusion to my read on it. Ian Gary is a great striker. I've sparred with many people like Ian Gary, and it's hard for me to completely remove myself. When I watch fights, I'm watching the styles. I'm watching their patterns and their habits. It's hard for me to look at Ian Gary and not relate him to it's hard for me to look at Ian Gary and not relate him to a lot of people who I've sparred before, professional fighters and the like. He's long, he's rangy, he plays the distance game. Rakhmonov is very well-rounded. He's good everywhere. If we could summarize this, it's gonna be a game. Here's what it's gonna be. Ian Gary playing keep away from Rakhmonov. I don't favor Ian Gary in that. I heavily favor Rakhmonov. I think if Ian Gary goes in with his style of kind of keep away, playing the range game, playing that distance game, Rakhmonov is going to get to him. To me, that's a given. What I think might happen, though, and this is the wrench that you could throw into my pick, Ian Gary might go in with the game plan of already knowing that he cannot stay away from Shavkat. He cannot, for the entire 3 rounds, he's not going to be able to keep that distance that he likes to maintain. Which means if he goes into the fight assuming that he cannot keep that distance, I still heavily favor Shavkat, but that is a different fight because I trust Ian Gary's team to come up with a game plan. That would make the fight more interesting. If Ian Gary does not go into it thinking he's going to be able to keep that distance between him and Shavkat. Shavkat is not going to rush it. He's not going to dive in. Because he's not just a wrestler, but he is far more skilled on the ground than Ian Gary, at least from what we've seen. So Shavkat is so well-rounded, though, you cannot count him out on the feet. That's the thing. But I pick Ian Gary on the feet over Shavkat but I just think it'll be a question of Ian Gary's game plan. Is he going in trying to make it a distance thing, assuming that he's going to be able to keep his distance from Shavkat? Or is he going into the fight assuming that he's going to be up and close and personal with Shavkat and he has a game plan prepared for that? Now, again, either way, I favor Shavkat. Either way. But if Ian Gary is going in with that mindset, that does change it. Cyril Gane versus Alexander Volkov. Honestly, the last performance we saw from Cyril Gane, it was versus John Jones. He pretty much, I was going to say laid down. He didn't lay down. John Jones is that much better than Cyril Gane. And that's just a fact. We haven't seen Alexander Volkov. When's the last time we saw Volkov? June 22nd. Versus the last time we saw Alexander Volkov, it was versus Sergey Pavlovich. It was a decision. Went all 3 rounds. Like I said, I have my fire going right now, so excuse me if I get up to put some firewood in the fire. Again, apologies for the smoke. I'm thinking it's not that big of a deal. I've checked it a couple times. I kind of like the look of the smoke going into the camera like this, and obviously I'll stop it if it gets out of hand or anything. So again, we have Cyril Gane versus Alexander Volkov. The last time we saw Cyril Gane, he got dominated by John Jones. The last time we saw Alexander Volkov, it was a decision versus Sergey Pavlovich. I think me, like most people, are kind of unsure what to make of Cyril Gane at this moment. It was such an easy fight for John, and Cyril Gane seemingly laid down, but we're kind of unsure at this point if that was Cyril Gane's just complete lack of a ground game, or did John Jones just the moment and the skill of John Jones just got to Cyril Gane and he crumbled. We're unsure. I'm not making a decision. Bryce Mitchell versus Kron Gracie. Yeah, I don't know. Bryce Mitchell hasn't fought. Has Bryce Mitchell fought since he got knocked out brutally? Let's go take a look. Bryce Mitchell. Yeah. So Bryce Mitchell's last fight was in December. It was on December 16th, 2023. So almost a year ago. And yeah, that was when he got knocked out by Josh Emmett. That was a brutal knockout, if I remember correctly. And he's always been kind of crazy. He's been saying all kind of crazy shit. Kron Gracie is also a wild card. You don't really know what you get from Kron Gracie. He's 5-2 in the UFC. I remember he fought. Didn't he fight Ryan Hall? He's had a couple weird fights. Obviously, he's a Gracie, so you know his name will get him wherever. Oh, he's fought since then. I just haven't been. Oh no, that's his grappling record. I was about to say he's fought that many times. No, he hasn't. His last fight was May of 2023, a loss versus Charles Jourdain. And it was a decision. His fight before that, he lost to Cub Swanson. I know I watched that one. That was in 2019. So he has a big gap from 2019 to 2023. And like I said, the last time Bryce Mitchell fought, he got brutally knocked out by Josh Emmett. Again, I'm not going through the fights. This is not me making picks. Betting wise, I'll make picks. I just don't want anybody to bet on what I'm saying. But as far as my picks go, I'm taking Pantoja strictly because I'm familiar with Pantoja in his game. I'm way less familiar with Asakura. And when in doubt, you go with the champion. So I'm going Pantoja. With the co-main, Shavkat versus Ian Gary, I'm going Shavkat. Again, I like Ian Gary. I don't know the full details about all this shit that he has going on with him and his girl and her ex-boyfriend. That's as much as I know. Like that. I don't know what the fuck is going on. But I remember when all that was going on. I know that's something that made a lot of people clown Ian Gary. I just don't know enough about it. I didn't really look into it. But I like Ian Gary's fighting style. I like Rakhmonov's fighting style. I'm taking Rakhmonov. Cyril Gane versus Volkov. Again, for me, this is a big unknown. Cyril Gane is just so unknown. Cyril Gane 12-2, Volkov 38-10. I'm gonna take Volkov. No specific way. I'm taking Volkov. Bryce Mitchell versus Kron Gracie. Again, two big unknowns. I'm gonna lean towards experience and go for Bryce Mitchell. Those are my picks for UFC 310. Now we're gonna go into the UFC Reddit page and just see what people are talking about, what current events are going on. So let's go to the new topics. People are hyping up Shavkat Rakhmonov because he really is completely well-rounded everywhere. You know, he's a modern-day GSP in terms of grappling and striking and wrestling. He's good everywhere. A bunch of people just making jokes and shit, which I assume. I don't really get on the UFC Reddit at all. I'm subscribed to it. I never really get on here. So UFC 311 was recently announced. I'm sure we'll get to that as I go through the UFC Reddit page. Beneil Dariush is fighting on that card, and he's fighting Moicano. Now, I'm pretty sure Moicano, he has a YouTube page. Good style, good fighter. I like watching him fight. He has a he has a YouTube page that I think is going crazy. I think it's called Money Moicano or something like that. Let's go see real quick. Podcast, the Renato Moicano podcast. He's got 60 subscribers on YouTube. He does good content also. A lot of it is in Portuguese, but I've seen some of his content before. It is good. I've watched it before with the subtitles. I'm pretty sure he called out Patty. Patty might have even responded to him because this UFC Reddit post is saying if he's fighting Beneil, who's Patty fighting. Let's see some of the comments. Somebody says Fiziev, Gaethje or Fiziev. He's not fighting. Paddy Pimblett is not fighting Justin Gaethje or Fiziev. Gaethje and Fiziev are legitimate destroyers. Paddy Pimblett is not even close to being somebody who you would consider a destroyer. Paddy Pimblett is still building his way up. I put Paddy Pimblett and Bo Nickel in the same category. They're rising fighters. They have a big name. They have a lot of potential, but their potential does not match their skill. So we're trying to wait for things to even out, but people are trying to rush it. And Bo Nickel himself is trying to rush it. They're both kind of trying to rush it in certain ways. I believe Patty responded. Patty probably only responded because of the popularity of Moicano's YouTube page. Is the fight going to happen? Clearly not. Moicano's fighting Dariush, which means Moicano is way more on track to fight for the title than Patty. Patty is still, like I said, Patty and Bo Nickel, I put them in the same category. I was trying to fuck with this cat before, and now I'm recording, and it wants to come fuck with me. But I put Patty. Let's see. I'm skipping past a lot of bullshit. It's Reddit, so there's a lot of bullshit on here. They're talking about Shavkat's stats. He's 18-0. He has 8 KOs and 10 submissions, so he's 100% finish rate. He has the 4th most submissions in welterweight history. He is the 3rd longest active win streak. People are talking about this Jamahal Hill and Alex Pereira interaction. I've seen bits and pieces. I haven't yet watched the full thing. I'm sure we will get to that. I want to get to that. People talking about Ilia Topuria versus Sean O'Malley. Will the fight ever happen? Fight might it might happen. It depends on the skill level of Sean O'Malley, which now I think Sean O'Malley has already had his prime. Not in terms of age or physical condition, just in terms of his career. I think we've seen his climb, and now we've seen the drop. And unfortunately for Sean O'Malley, I think that he'll stay around. He'll always be a high-level fighter. He'll be in the mix. I'm just not sure if we'll see him as champion again. And if he's not champion again, I don't know what sense it'll make for Topuria, because I see Topuria being a champion for much longer. People joking on Jamahal Hill. I'm also not a big Jamahal Hill fan. I'm going to be honest. He seems kind of like a clown. I just saw somebody post a screenshot of Israel versus Yuri, and they faked like it was for UFC 311. Fantastic fight. That, for me, as soon as Alex Pereira entered light heavyweight, I was thinking of him versus Yuri. I love Yuri's style. Maybe it's just me. I'm a Yuri fan. I'm a big Yuri fan. I'm a big Alex fan. I'm a big Israel fan. I like all those guys. I would love to see Israel versus Yuri. That is a style made in heaven. Everybody would like that. Now I'm looking for the full video of this Alex Pereira and Jamahal Hill interaction, because that's what everybody's talking about. I want to get to the bottom of it. Here it is right here. So in this clip that I'm watching, Jamahal Hill comes up to Pereira. Let me pause this. Jamahal Hill comes up to, what the fuck? Jamahal Hill comes up to Pereira saying we're not on Twitter now. Alex Pereira doesn't speak English. I'm assuming he probably doesn't really understand it. He doesn't know what Jamahal Hill is saying. He just knows that this is a guy who has some animosity towards him. And I'm assuming he knows that because Jamahal Hill has been talking shit on Twitter. And Alex Pereira has been, I was going to say he was jabbing back. I think he threw one jab back. He already knocked him out. It's kind of a done issue. Nobody's really dying to see Jamahal Hill versus Pereira again. If we end up seeing it again, it will just be because Pereira is staying at light heavyweight and there's not a lot of contenders. He walks up to Pereira and he says we're not on Twitter now. Pereira, unless his trainer, I forget the guy's name, Plinio, something like that. Unless he's translated for him in real time, which he very well may well be. Alex Pereira doesn't know what he's saying, but he sees Jamahal Hill coming up to him. He's coming up with a certain attitude. Immediately, Pereira gives him a dap. He's trying to dap him up. Let me watch it again. So he comes up saying we're not on Twitter now. Pereira gives him a dap. He's not worried about it. And then the very next, it's a cut scene, and then very next is Pereira throwing gloves at Jamahal Hill, clearly being like, okay, let's fight. Let's spar at least. Obviously, we don't know what he's saying. Jamahal Hill saying, let's make money. So Jamahal Hill is just trying to hype up a fight between the two. He realizes that Pereira is a big star. He realizes that he's not. He realizes that he kind of lucked up into a position where he even got to fight for the title, fight that big of a fight, and that's a hard thing to let go of. He's not going to let go of that easily. He fought him. There is some slight controversy in their fight. I think it was Herb Dean, who was a ref, who he saw a low blow. Pereira waved him off. It kind of caused an interruption in the action, and then Jamahal Hill got knocked out. Through the replays, the ref interaction, I mean, it's an interruption for sure of the action, but I don't think anybody seriously thinks that affected the result. He's keeping himself in the headlines. He is staying involved with Pereira because he knows that that's his main claim to fame, is that fight, and the fact that there was a slight bit of controversy in that fight. Unfortunately, though, at least speaking personally, I have very low interest in seeing that fight again. I strongly believe it would go the exact same way that it went, and Jamahal Hill is just not convincing me at all. I know that this is him doing that, though. This is Jamahal Hill playing the game, and this is his version of that, and I respect that. He's not doing it in a way that makes me want to see the fight. That's all. UFC 311. Let me pull up this card. I know Dana recently announced a couple fights on UFC 311. So let's go over the card as it stands so far. Makhachev versus Saryukian. By the way, this is January 18th, so next year, UFC 311, main event, Islam Makhachev versus Arman Saryukian. The co-main event is Merab Dvalishvili versus Umar Nurmagomedov. I mean, already, just with those two, the main and the co-main, that's a hell of a fight. You have both of those are great fucking fights. Let's get back to the Reddit. If Volk and Ilya were to run it back, what do you think Volk would have to do to give himself the best chance of winning? That's a good question, because poisoning Ilya. The very first answer is poisoning Ilya the night of the fight. Just purely based on the way he looks scared of Toporia's punches, I think the mental effect of that Islam KO has already done the damage. Admittedly, I probably need to go back and watch that fight. Obviously, I saw it in real time, but I never went back and watched it. A lot of people are very hyped on Topuria. I like his boxing skill. You don't have to watch a lot of tape to see he's a good MMA boxer. I'm not as sold as everybody else. But that's because I haven't went back and watched a lot of tape on Topuria. A lot of people saying he would need to go back and beat somebody else first. So basically, he needs a win in order to give him that confidence to beat Topuria, which I would believe he had just suffered a brutal knockout loss to Islam before that fight. So for sure that was on his mind going into that fight. That was a last minute fight, but either way, he took it knowing that.
Event of this paper.
This is a post saying, which UFC fighter has the most excuses after they lose a fight? The number one answer with 73 likes is Jamahal Hill. The next post is Tito. The next one is Michael Chandler. The Diaz brothers, Jamahal Hill, Colby, Connor, Connor. This is what MMA media has made a mistake of doing, is that they highlight a lot of people who, in their post-fight reactions, they admit that they lost the fight, say, I got beat by a better guy, and then they list off a bunch of excuses, and MMA media will consider that owning up to a loss. You know, it's kind of
pay-per-view.
It's kind of crazy, honestly. Listen to people after they lose. Listen to what they actually have to say. If they immediately start talking about lack on their part in terms of training or injury or circumstances or the situation, I'm not saying that they're wrong to point that out, because everything that they're saying is probably true, but we can't call that owning up to your loss. That's because that's not what that is. We see people win all the time, and then they'll talk about, way later, they'll talk about the injuries that they had. I think Charles Oliveira just did that when he beat Michael Chandler, talking about the losses that he had. When somebody loses and they immediately go to the post-fight conference and they start talking about their injuries and stuff like that, no matter what they have already said in that post-fight conference, they have not owned up to their loss because they've hid it in the excuse. They've made the excuse already, and now they will own up to the loss. Now they will openly admit that this person beat them, but not until they've already said that they were injured, they had an awful training camp, they were sick for a month before the fight. These things do not make for a good loser. If we're trying to give people credit for handling a loss well, somebody who goes to the press conference and makes excuses is not somebody who has handled the loss well, just because they show up to the press conference. That doesn't mean anything for me.
Max is good as fuck, but why are people acting like that's a tough matchup with Islam? I know, dude. He's looking to counter. There you go.
Oh! Huge talk about. What's going on here?
Let's go, guys. Come on, bro.
And you make the UFC great again, Connor.
Bryce Mitchell expresses his
him.
opinion on seatbelts.
So I don't personally wear a seatbelt, but I grew up, my mom never wore one. I just don't believe in them.
Now, we probably need to see the full context of what he's talking about. But I've seen enough posts and whatnot, and this clip in itself, to know that he's saying that he doesn't believe in the idea of forcing seatbelts on people. I saw a post that said something where he was like, what if you need to jump out of a car? That sounds silly, and it is silly. The whole idea that he's preaching is silly. But what he's preaching, what he's trying to preach, is he doesn't believe in people forcing things on you. I also don't believe in people forcing things on you. However, seatbelts is not the thing to rise up against. I think Bryce Mitchell is confused. I think that he means well, but he is invested in the wrong conversations, if that makes sense. He, because like I said, his idea of not believing in seatbelts is based upon the idea of not believing in anything being forced upon people. Why do you have the right to tell me that I have to wear a seatbelt in my car? I'm driving in my car on the road What gives you the right to tell me that I have to wear a seatbelt? I understand that. On a very basic level, I understand that. And I understand it because I feel the same way. I I feel the same way of why should anybody be able to force anything upon me? However, at the same time, we have to be realistic. We can't be delusional with ourselves. Seatbelts. Let's look up the rate that seatbelts increase. Let's see seatbelt. Let's just look up. And I'm doing it with one glove, so give me a break. Seatbelt. Laws history. Let's see. So the first federal law mandating all new cars to be equipped with the option of both a lap and a shoulder belt in the front seat was introduced in 1968. Let's see. That was the first time it was nationally mandated. That's not really what I wanted. What I really wanted to get into belts are the most effective safety technology for automobiles. They reduce the risk of fatal injury for front seat passengers by 45%. They reduce the rate from moderate to critical injury to front seat passengers by 50%, meaning that going from a critical injury, no seatbelt, to a moderate injury, you can increase your risk of being critical to moderate by 50% by wearing a seatbelt. The death to front seat light truck occupants, which I'm just Googling this, I'm assuming this is talking about just a lightweight truck. You know what I mean? Not a heavy duty truck. It reduces the risk of death by 60%, and it reduces the rate of moderate to between 1960 and 2012. Seat belts have saved more lives than all other vehicle technologies combined. From 1975 to 2017, seat belts are estimated to have saved 374,276 lives. The facts about seatbelts. Now, why am I bringing this up? Because the idea of combating a law just for the fact of combating a law is silly. Again, I agree with Bryce Mitchell in terms of I don't like the idea of people forcing things upon me that I didn't choose with stuff that I paid for with my own money. I buy a car with my own money. How can you tell me how to use it? How can you tell me if you see me driving and I decided not to buckle up because I'm running to the gas station real quick? How can you decide to stop me and give me a ticket? I bought the car. Even if you want to get into life, my own life, it's my own life. The seatbelt, it only helps my own life. So if I decide that I don't want to wear it, who are you to stop me? The reason why the seatbelt is a law is because it has saved so many lives. So if you have an issue with the law, you have to have a combatant to the fact that it has saved so many lives. Other than I just don't want to do it because I don't want anything forced upon me. So Bryce Mitchell believes that the Earth is flat, space and planets, including Mars, do not exist. Elon Musk is the Antichrist. NASA will stage a fake alien invasion. He rejects the idea of revolution. He believes that mass shootings are staged. By the way, I'm reading this from Reddit. This is a Reddit post. He believes that the Big Bang and the moon landings were fabricated. He believes that public school shootings are indoctrinated with communist ideologies. This post has a lot of comments. And somebody else posted a Facebook post by Bryce Mitchell. Gonna train today, but I ripped my nutsack in half. I'm about to get stitched up. I was holding a board over my head with a drill in my pants. Let's stop right there. I'm holding a board over my head. I got a drill in my pants. I was sizing up the board, so we're assuming that he's holding up the board over his head. He's trying to match it up to a beam that he has overhead. He says, so I was sizing up the board and the drill went off and tangled my nuts up in it. So I was holding up a board. I ripped my nutsack in half. I'm holding up a board. I got a drill in my pants. So he's got a drill. Immediately, you're doing the wrong thing. Why the fuck do I have a drill in my pants? That don't make no sense. I'm holding up a board. I was sizing it up. I got a drill in my pants. I dropped the board. He says, I was sizing up the board and the drill went off and tangled my nuts up in it. I dropped the board and reversed the drill. So this is what his words, and reversed the drill and untangled my nutsack, but they was ripped in half. I dropped the board and reversed the drill and untangled my nutsack, but they was ripped in, the letter N, half. I'm serious too, LOL. I obviously can't post a pic, but when my nuts are sealed back up, I'ma come train again. I think a high kick would re-rip them. In other words, if he throws a high kick, he feels like he would re-rip the staples that he has in his nuts. And if I hear any shitty puns about how this is nutty or screwed up, I ain't talked to you for about a month. If you're gonna drop a pun to make fun of me, at least put some thought into it. INTO LOL. That's it. But I'm assuming it means put some thought into it. In other words, if you're gonna make fun of me, put some thought into it. Don't come at me with this lame shit. But I'm gonna be honest with you. That shit is crazy. I never heard no shit like that before. StanceSwitch, the podcast. My name is Brandon. This is the UFC 310 preview. This is StanceSwitch. We dived into the UFC Reddit page a little bit. If you like what you're seeing, like the page, comment, subscribe.